Here is the deal. Let me give it to you real. The key to connection is to learn to be real because you are not perfect and neither am I. And that is the exact reason that we see eye to eye because everybody's different, but we are all the same. To be perfectly imperfect is how you win the game. And if you only showcase good and do not share the bad, you will miss connections that you never knew you had. So Facebook, Twitter, Gram, are you LinkedIn? Are you Meta, Enid, Facebook just to stay in? Stop worrying about everybody else. Focus on being your authentic self.
Hi, I'm Nishant Garg with WhatMarketWants. My guest for today is a brand and marketing consultant. He's here to talk about B2B marketing. He's an author, a keynote speaker, an instructor at the University of California. He has been featured in Forbes, Fortune Magazine, Entrepreneur Magazine, the Huffington Post, Mashable, Inc., and many other media outlets. Let's welcome Ryan Foland. Hi.
Ahoy, it's great to be here.
So, Ryan, from a student to an instructor to a keynote speaker, how has your journey been?
You know, I will say that I am always a student, and that is the trick to a journey. I think as soon as you stop learning, then you stop improving. And I think that one of the reasons why I love to teach is that it's a learning process. And so I'm always learning. I'm always looking at research. I'm always testing out new ideas. And I think that that's the way to stay one step ahead, which really is about where you need to be, especially with how fast things are always changing.
So true. So tell me, what is so different about B2B marketing?
What's different is that you're trying to have businesses talk to other businesses. And therefore, some of the what you would think more traditional market appeal kind of goes out the window. Because businesses, I think, in general, want to cut to the chase. They want to know more about what's in it for them. And I think when you're going with a business to consumer model or B2C model, there's a lot more opportunity to play with the sizzle on the steak and really sell the benefits and have fun with it. You know, I think that typically we look at B2B marketing as more stagnant, as more factual based, as less sizzle, but like show me the steak. And so I think that traditionally is the difference between a consumer-driven marketing approach or a business-to-business driven marketing approach. But I feel that there's a missed opportunity in business-to-business to really insert that human element. Because I believe at the end of the day, people don't want to do business with businesses. People want to do business with people. And in the same respect, I don't really think businesses want to do business with businesses. People who work at businesses end up wanting to do business with people and other businesses. Say that 10 times fast.
All right. So tell me, in your view, how has B2B marketing evolved in the last decade?
Well, I think the last decade, it is completely changed from more of an old school, pick up your brick phone, meeting in person, just a very, very antiquated system that is really built probably on relationships and cold calling and hard selling. And I think the change over the last 10 years has been to more of a social selling. Because at the end of the day, the business that you're selling to is still a consumer, but they're a consumer for your business. And so if you are isolated on your own island, and there's no visibility and people can't see what makes your business tick, if people can't click to find out who's involved with the business, if you're sort of hiding from a business perspective, then you lose the opportunity to relate socially, to share what your business is doing for other businesses. So I would say that more social selling is catching on to the B2B world. And I think that with such an increase in the amount of businesses that are vying for other businesses' business, there's an opportunity to help employees and to help leaders within the company turn that traditional B2B kind of cold calling approach into something that might be a little bit more personable. You might see a CEO at a conference that's speaking, and that might spark your initial interest in the company. And then you check out their website, and then you're following their social channels as another business. And when you see what they're doing, and you can get a chance to get them to know them a little bit better, and you can direct message them, or you can find them and try to start that conversation. So I think it's gone from more of a cold, hardcore sales approach 10 years ago to a softer, more relationship-based, possible social selling aspects. 10 years is a big gap, but I think that's, if I had to look at that overall arch, that's what I'd say.
Wow. So tell me, what are the most common misconceptions around B2B marketing?
That CEOs and executives should hide behind the brand.
Okay. What do you exactly mean by that? Could you elaborate?
That is the biggest mistake. So the biggest mistake that I believe B2B companies make is when their leadership is hiding behind the company brand. Now, traditionally, a corporation or a business, especially those that sell it to other businesses, think to themselves, why on earth would we worry about the brands of our leadership or even our employees when we have our corporate brand? We are big name company. But again, I think that there's a missed opportunity, because the more you can personalize that business offering, because remember, at the end of the day, however good of a fit your business solution is for another business, there's going to be an account executive or a representative or somebody who is connecting those dots to gather the information and convince leaders up the chain. And when you can put people in front of and help to personalize this larger corporate brand, I think it works in the favor of salespeople to be able to relate better, to build those relationships, because at the end of the day, it's still a person, and a person that's connecting to make the business actually happen.
Wow, there's a lot to process over there. But in short, what you mean is companies need to humanize their B2B marketing approach.
Absolutely. I think the more you can incorporate humans into business to business marketing and communications and sales, the more successful those business to business transactions will be, because at the root of all those transactions, you're still dealing with people. And I believe that is an element that can be incorporated in B2B.
So according to you, how does brand building work in the B2B marketing space? Are the rules different for a B2B company?
Well, yes. The biggest difference is that you're not catering to a consumer marketplace. And so what that means visually from a branding standpoint, it's going to typically be less playful, maybe more modern or more sleek. When it comes to the type of content that's being created, you're not as much trying to appeal to a large consumer mass. You're trying to speak about the problems that your company is solving, and you're talking about use cases where they can see value in what you're providing. There's more facts, more white papers, more statistics, more show me the bottom line. And so that content tends to be a bit more rigid, harder to read. And so from a consumer standpoint, things are more playful. From a B2B standpoint, things are more serious. But at the end of the day, there's opportunity in both of those realms to still sprinkle in that human element. And I think that that's an opportunity that is for the taking, especially in a world where we're digitally connected and we have information that we can find before we ever even start a conversation with that business.
So how often do you come across companies that are losing out on a lot of opportunities due to a weak B2B marketing strategy?
I would say that it's hard to claim that everyone is at their fullest max potential. And that's goes back to what I said originally, to where for me personally, I'm always trying to learn, I'm always trying to test, optimize, and scale. When it comes to a B2B section, if you're doing the same things that you were doing last year and the year before that, there's a good chance that you're missing out on some new channels, new avenues, new ways of getting yourself out there. And so it could be looking at new types of technologies. It could be looking at new types of technology trends. It could be looking at things like 5G and how that could take their business services to the next level. How do they tie into social trends? How do they tie into political trends? And so if you're a B2B marketing company and you're doing the exact same thing that you did last year, that would be an indication that you're missing out on some sort of opportunity that you haven't stumbled across yet.
So what role does the CEO play in the whole B2B equation?
I believe the CEO should be in front of the company. I believe that the CEO is the company. They help to not only set and establish the internal culture and the internal vibe that the company has, but I think that outward facing, they are a spokesperson. They are the person who is thinking deepest about the industry, about the offerings, about the problems that are being solved. And if they're not creating content, if they're not sharing what they're thinking and what typically would be known as thought leadership, whether it's an op-ed or whether they write for a publication or whether they have a blog that they're posting on, or whether it's a company newsletter that they're updating their employees or the vendors, I think that it's a missed opportunity. Because when you create content, it creates what I call a brand crumb. So imagine like a breadcrumb, like these little brand crumbs. And if you share little brand crumbs about your thoughts, about I'm doing this, I was thinking about this, here's where I think things are going, this is what we're doing, then people can pick up those little brand crumbs and they can follow what's going on. They can see you as somebody who is a thought leader in that space. And if you're going to work in the B2B space, you're not looking for a flash in the pan company to work with. You're looking for somebody who's established, that's not going to be fly by night, that's not going to disappear on you. And if you have a CEO who's in front, who's there, who's accessible, who's visual, or who's visible, then I think that is almost like some gorilla glue that you can pour down at the top of the organization that sort of holds things together.
Wow, that's powerful. So tell me, if you have to break it down, what are the 3 key elements of a B2B marketing strategy? What should companies be thinking about?
I would say look at channels where your customers are. That's number one. So I'm not saying you need to be on any one particular channel. I am saying that you need to understand where the decision makers are. And that is a first step. The second step, create content, whether it's video, whether you're a guest on a podcast, where you're speaking on stage, whether it's internal communication. You want to talk in terms of the problems that you solve. I talk a lot to entrepreneurs all the way to scale-ups and people, companies that are on their way to being unicorns. And I try to reinforce a simple but hard to accept fact. People don't care what you do. They don't care what your company does. They don't care what your products do. They don't care what the name of it is. They don't care what it looks like. What they care about is the problem that you solve, the problem that your company solves, the problem that the product solves, the product, what it actually does. Okay, so there's a slight difference in historically, we tend to default to prioritizing our solution. But that is a mistake, because as soon as you start talking about your solution, people immediately think that you're selling them. It's easy for them to think, oh, I've heard of that before. It's easy for them to think, well, that's not really going to help me out. But that's because you're telling them a solution that they're not familiar with. So let's think about flipping the order of information. If instead your content is focused on the problems that you're solving, and you talk about the problems, and you write an article about the 7 questions that these people need to ask before they do this, and you get into deep analysis of how painful these problems are. These are the problems that people will identify with. And if a company says, my goodness, I have that problem, then they will be interested in your solution because they're focused on solving their problem. But your solution might not initially on its own make people think it's going to help them out. So step one is understand where your target market is first. Then create content that's focused on the derivative of the solution, which is the problem that you're solving, the set of problems that you're solving, how you're solving those problems. And I would say the third, I'm going to go back to making sure that your CEO is comfortable with being right next to and right in front of the company from a visibility and taking opportunities to share from a human about what the business is doing.
Wow. Clearly, the sequence in which you do things matters. A lot of companies make announcements about how great they are and where they were featured. They don't realize that people won't care about it unless you first communicate with them about their problems and engage them. Branding is not bragging, it's beyond that.
Right. Well, I like that. Sometimes branding feels like bragging. Now, there's nothing wrong with sharing, getting featured in your accolades. That's what I call validation.
Yeah.
But I talk about branding in 4 steps, and I call them the 4 V's. And okay. Validation, what you mentioned, featured and all of the bragging sort of stuff, that comes at the very end. That's something that you earn. Okay. The first V is understanding the vision. Because if you don't understand the company's vision, how can you expect your employees to understand it? How can you expect your future customers to understand it? So understanding your vision first, then establishing your voice. And your voice is what I was talking about as far as content and the tone, about sharing information that people resonate with, about the problems. Then the third V is volume. Volume means taking the content that you create and spreading it as far and wide as possible so people can see it, especially your target market. I don't think that you have to create a ton of content, but you have to create content and you have to learn how to put it in a ton of places. And when you do that, when you have a clear vision, you have a voice when people are hearing you, and you have volume where you're spreading this information wide, that usually leads to validation, where you are featured. People see that you're moving and shaking. They want to learn about you. You become seen as a company that is a force to be reckoned with. And in that respect, I think that people flip the order sometimes and try to focus on the validation first. And then maybe they're trying to create volume, but they haven't established their voice. And that's because they haven't really clarified their vision. And so I think a lot of times, whether it's an entrepreneur starting a dog walking company, or it's an enterprise that's creating 5G network solutions, oftentimes we do the right things in the wrong order. And when you do the right things in the wrong order, you get completely different results than if you did the right things in the right order. And that's where sometimes people don't know that they're not doing things. It's not that they're doing things right or wrong. They're doing the right things. But when those right things are in the wrong order, you're not going to get the return on those efforts.
Wow, the 4 V's. That's absolutely brilliant. So tell me, what are your top 3 B2B marketing tips? Do you have any secret formula to share over there as well?
I'd say one is making sure that you're strategically supporting enterprise sales. Now, I like to look at marketing in the B2B world as enterprise sales support. So that's a little different, because if you think of marketing, you think of going out there and elevating the profile of the company, elevating the profile of the CEO, letting the right people know about the right the information. But if you take that concept and you think of it, my sole purpose of doing this marketing is for enterprise sales support. That helps to put a frame on what you're doing to make sure that you are on platforms, marketing in a place where your target customers are going to hear. It means that you're going to be creating content that's focused, not from a marketing standpoint, but from a standpoint that when people read it, they're going to recognize and identify with the problems and want to learn more about the solutions. So I think that would be the number one, if we're looking at three here, which is understanding and seeing fundamentally, you're not a marketer, you are a enterprise sales support organization, department or something like that. Yeah. The second thing I'd say is you want to empower, but not demand that your sales team participates in social selling. It's one thing, and I've learned this, the hard way, where from an enterprise sales support, that let's say LinkedIn is a channel where your target audience is, and you want to create content from the company, and you want to create content from the CEO, and then you want support from your sales team. And so if you ask your sales team to like, share, and comment on these posts, that might not always work because a salesperson is different. An engineering person is different. They don't have that marketing mentality. And sometimes if you tell them to do things, they can get defensive. And when you're asking people to post on their social media, their personal accounts, their own LinkedIn, it has to have an element of choice. And so in a company I'm working with right now in a B2B marketing, instead of asking the sales and engineering team to support the marketing messages, from a marketing standpoint, we're researching articles, white papers, interesting things that highlight the problems that are being solved, and then share it with the team. And it's up to them if they want to share it or not. So that allows there to be a certain amount of autonomy and choice, and it allows the sales team to work closely with the marketing and see that as an approach. The third thing I'd say is deep research, learning, reading, white papers, industry forums. Get all of the research that you can, because I'm telling you, things are changing so fast that if you're basing your marketing on what you know from last year or the year before, it's outdated. So a lot of my time is deep in these forums, is reading, Gartner research papers and understanding the life cycles of certain ideas and how to tap into these conversations. And it's intimidating to read these white papers. It's intimidating to watch all these YouTube videos and try to figure out really the moving parts of the technology that you're marketing. Yeah. But as a marketer, if you can become proficient from a technical skill of what your company is trying to provide, it empowers you as a marketer. You're now able to provide information and have the CEO and technical team review it, as opposed to having the technical team and the salespeople and the people that know about it give you the information that you then have to translate. So again, if you're involved in a B2B marketing situation, when was the last time that you read a white paper? When was the last time that you searched and scraped hashtags on LinkedIn to find people and information that happened within the week? And so if we recap these three lessons, one is see your role as a marketer as enterprise sales support. Two, to support the sales, don't prescribe for them what to do. It's not going to work. Keep the choice in place and help support them to make it easier for them to find information that they might feel comfortable sharing. And then the third point is this idea of really learning like a deep understanding of what you're marketing, because otherwise your marketing and content might just be surface level, and nobody's going to hire somebody who's at surface level. They're going to hire you because you know this better than anyone else.
Awesome. So tell me, which B2B companies are doing a great job at marketing themselves and their offerings?
Well, let's see. I mean, the challenge is that there's a whole bunch of different industries if we're looking at B2B. I think that in the technology space, I think it's interesting to look at all the telecoms right now, as they are all vying for the same business in, let's say, this new 5G market. And if you look at Verizon, if you look at T-Mobile, and you look at AT&T, all three of them have slightly different strategies and how they're marketing. But what's interesting with some of these larger companies is that they have a B2C and a B2B component. And so I'm interested to see how that plays out, because on one side, in the 5G space specifically, you're looking at educating a consumer about a new low latency, high bandwidth opportunity that really is still a few years away from being what they're promising. And then sort of behind the scenes, you have a lot of these companies and telcos that are all vying for the private 5G networks. And the marketing that's happening there is along the same lines that we've talked about. People are trying to show that they are the deepest thinkers in the industry, and they are trying to, connect the C-level leaders with these B2B SaaS providers who can help to take this new technology, 5G, and actually get people to take the leap and get people to take those next steps. So I would say, I'm not going to call out anybody in particular, but I say in the telecom space right now and the network provider space, it's interesting to take a peek and seeing what they're doing, because right now there's quite a battle of eyes and ears and fingers and mouse on the computer to grab that attention and connect those dots.
So are there any B2B marketing campaigns that come to your mind that you consider as iconic?
As far as a marketing campaign, nothing comes to exactly mind, because a lot of the campaigns that I think are successful on B2B, the public's not really seeing, right? It's not something that you're going to see on a main commercial on TV, because that's a business to consumer. So I think that the people that are doing really well are those people who are active on LinkedIn in some of these communities where the content that they're creating is getting a lot of traction, and having those sort of conversations outside of the main public sphere.
In my view, the Intel Insight campaign is an iconic example. Despite being a B2B company, they marketed their computer chipsets to end users and made people care about what chip is there in their PCs. This indirect approach clearly helped them dominate the market, boost their sales, and build a brand.
Yeah, and in my mind, I'm just thinking of that little sticker that's on the computer where you feel good about it because you know it's got the Intel. So that's a good example, yes.
So according to you, which brand is not doing a great job in the B2B space?
If there was, I probably wouldn't throw them under the bus. So...
Good. I've been trying to get my guests to name some brand and give me some controversial content, but they always back out. Okay. So who do you look up to in your industry? Who do you look up to? Who's your idol?
I would say that even though he's not as B2B, I think Gary Vaynerchuk, from a concept of being front of the line, front of technology, exploring new things, adopting media, all of his spinouts, Vayner this, Vayner that, Vayner this, Vayner that. I really admire him in his ability to become such a successful generalist. And so I think that, Gary V's adoption of technology, the way he's jumping into NFTs, the way he's jumping into the speaking circuit, the way he's jumping into all these different areas, I think he's done a really good job at putting himself in front. And I think that's a good example of how he's humanized really his VaynerMedia. And VaynerMedia is very successful at helping these businesses in marketing to other businesses.
So you earlier mentioned you consider yourself as a student. So I have to ask you, what are your favorite branding and marketing books?
Branding and marketing books. So one of my favorite, now it's not a direct marketing book, but I think that any effective marketing is really just sales and pitching in a Halloween costume, right? At the end of the day. Yeah. And there's a book called Pitch Anything by Oren Klaff. And it is one of the most fascinating books about interactions between people and how the conversations are framed. I think it's fascinating. I'll also say that Tiffany Bova, a friend of mine, she has a book called Growth IQ. And it's fascinating to look at the breakdown. And she talks a lot about how just like emotional intelligence, growth is its own sort of way of looking at things. So those would be two books. And to round it out with the three, I'd say check out Keith Ferrazzi. He has 3 books, one on the way, and they are all foundational for networking and relationship building. Who's Got Your Back? Never Eat Alone, Leading Without Authority, And then his fourth book, I just saw him announce it, but I don't recall it off the top of my head. So there you go. Oren Klaff, Tiffany Bova, Keith Ferrazzi. And then, obviously you can pick up my book, Ditch the Act, but that's besides the point.
So could you tell us a bit more about your book? What is your inspiration behind writing it?
What inspired me to write the book was that I stumbled upon, with a business partner at the time, sort of a new way of looking at branding, new way than I had thought. And I always thought that to build a brand, you fake it till you make it. You put on a show, you put on the mask, you put on the suit, and you act as if. Now, I tried that and it didn't work. And it was only once I started to be a bit more vulnerable about my journey and share what was really going on that people actually started to resonate and connect with me. So the whole process is a look at how to build an authentic personal brand by just being who you are. And it's not an easy thing because sometimes we're afraid that people will judge us, which they will. We're afraid that if we share what's gone wrong, then they're going to look at us in a different way, which they will. But surprisingly, they don't always look at you in a negative way. They look at you as more relatable. And at the end of the day, what is on the back of the book and what sums it all up, it's 308 pages, which basically says the best thing that you can do in business today is to be human. And I think that is a core of what you get out of reading the book.
Wow, that's great. I saw one of your TEDx talks sometime back.
Which one? Because I've got 4 of them.
It had a rap performance in the end. So I wanted to ask you, do you have something prepared around B2B marketing as well? Is there something you can do for us today?
I have a few raps, and I think that a lot of them can be applied to both B2B and more of a B2C. I might have to come up with an exact business B2B rap. Now you've got me inspired. But I do have a rap that works if we're tying to this idea of ditching the act and this idea of being human. Because here is the deal. Let me give it to you real. The key to connection is to learn to be real because you are not perfect and neither am I. And that is the exact reason that we see eye to eye because everybody's different, but we are all the same. To be perfectly imperfect is how you win the game. And if you only showcase good and do not share the bad, you will miss connections that you never knew you had. So Facebook, Twitter, Gram, are you LinkedIn? Are you Meta, Enid, Facebook just to stay in? Stop worrying about everybody else. Focus on being your authentic self.
Wow, that was great. I know who to contact when I need a jingle for What Market Wants now.
Totally. The ginger jingle. Just let me know.
Lovely. Thanks a lot for your time and insight. It was great talking to you.
Hey, it was fun talking with you as well. I appreciate the opportunity just to share a core concept of putting the human back into business. And if somebody wants to check out one of my 4 TEDx talks, or they want to read some of my content or see some of my videos or hire me to come speak at their company, it's easy. If you want to find me online, go to ryan.online. That's what I got for you.
If you found this interesting, you must check out his book. You'll find the link in the description. To get more such great insights from the world of business, branding, and marketing, subscribe to What Market Wants, share this with someone you want to help, and let me help you unlock your market potential. Cheers.